Now, a report reveals 80% of schools are dysfunctional. Most of them serve black and coloured pupils. The Equal Education study looked into underperforming schools. It found shortages of study material, poverty and violence plague most schools. To discuss this further, we're joined by junior attorney at the Equal Education Law Centre, Pila-Sande Mkuzo. Ms. Mkuzo, good morning and thank you very much for your time. I must say it's really concerning how after so many years, there's very little effort to come up with a plan that deals with underperformance holistically. They're always just dealing with a piecemeal where it's just perhaps looking at the academic aspect of things without dealing with the other issues that are seen to be external. Just talk to us about what your research found.
Good morning, Mfundo. It's a pleasure to be talking to you this morning. So our report found at least 4 fundamental issues. The first one being the excessive focus on academic performance when looking at underperforming schools, the limited role played by the head of department when it comes to support and remedial intervention, the lack of clear guidance in terms of remedial interventions, what should be given to schools when they are underperforming. And lastly, the issue of implementation. Accountability mechanisms are there, but are not working well in practice.
And then who were the most affected insofar as the youths are concerned? We understand that it's perhaps the black and coloured youths. Can you just elaborate on this?
The reality is, Mfundo, that these underperforming schools, based on the reports that we looked at, are schools that are in our rural areas, our township areas, schools that provide education to poor to middle class folk in South Africa. So by that, you can already tell who are the people who are at this receiving end of this particular problem.
So what were some of the recommendations? Because clearly here we're seeing that inequality persists. What were some of your recommendations?
So one of our first recommendations is a regulatory reform, right, that facilitates a more holistic approach to school underperformance and moving away from the excessive focus of academic performance. So this is taking into consideration the contextual factors that play into underperformance of the school. Now to start looking at reports on teacher quality and teacher retention, looking at things like learner dropouts, problems around management and the leadership of the school, and not only focusing on 3 particular issues as the law stands at this particular moment in time.
What have you found was the reason they really had no appetite to deal with poor management of a school or perhaps even the teacher quality? Has there been some sort of politicization of this particular aspect where many were not willing in schools to touch that aspect, to say perhaps some of our teachers are not properly trained? It's not necessarily that the children just get poor outcomes, it really is the teachers.
The reports that we looked at, right, it was a common trend that came up that teacher quality and retention was a cross-cutting issue in most of the provinces, right? And the reports that we got were provinces from the provincial education departments coming from the school and schools flagging this as a problem, and even departments flagging this as a problem. I think it comes back to what I was saying around the criteria and how narrow the criteria is, and therefore narrowing the type of support and remedial intervention that can then take place in those circumstances.
Do you have any recommendations around or that involve the school governing body? What would need to be their role going forward?
Definitely. So presently, SGBs hold a very critical role in terms of turning the situation around and coming up with the school improvement plan. However, this function is being hampered due to lack of training and capacitation, right? So what is critical at this point in time is the training and the capacitation of SGBs so that they provide effective oversight. Additional to that is now bringing in parents and having parents play their role in terms of how school reports are drafted, as opposed to just giving how the learner performed, but look at broader things of what was the teacher retention and turnover in the school, how is the school performing compared to other schools in the district. So taking and looking at the report as a more of a holistic report as opposed to just a learner's report, but a school report.
All right, Pila-Sande, thank you very much for your time. That was Pila-Sande Mkuzo from the Equal Education Law Centre. More news on the